Hello and welcome to the only show that celebrates Boonta Eve, but not Boonta. I am Max.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Luke.
And this is Force for Thought.
That was good.
That was great.
That was a good
Why
one.
don't we celebrate Boonta? I never even heard of it.
Boonta Day, excuse me. All right, so with Ahsoka coming out soon, followed by Skeleton Crew and other brand new stories scheduled out for the next few years, we have been asking ourselves, what other stories do we want told? There have been lots of loose threads teased in movies, TV shows, books, and more. So let's get started with some of the stories that we want told, and I'm going to start with a little bit of a side tangent about something that's going on right now that's kind of topical.
Would you call this your force for thought for the episode?
I would. This is kind of my force for thought, I guess, and I'm going to tie it into what we want to talk about because Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny has just come out over the weekend. As of recording this, it came out almost a week ago, and by the time this is released, it'll be out for almost a month. But it did not come out to a very strong box office at all. It actually only came out to about 60 million domestic, which was very low. A lot of people are very nervous. They're no one's calling it a flop yet, but there's a lot of people who are very skeptical that this thing's going to make its money back, partially because it was budgeted so insanely high. It was estimated to have approximately a $300 million budget. There were recent reports that it was actually north of that, and that's not including print and advertising costs. And I bring it up because it was directed by James Mangold, who obviously has a Star Wars movie in the works about the dawn of the Jedi era. And unfortunately, Star Wars has a long track record within the short 8 years since it's been with Disney of tying projects to certain directors, producers, writers, whoever, and then suddenly getting cold feet as soon as anything comes out that's being panned by the audience or critics, or if it flops or bombs or whatever. We've seen it happen numerous times with D&D from Game of Thrones being promised a project, and then after the season finale, that got shelved in air quotes. We saw it with Rian Johnson. He was supposed to have his own trilogy, and then after The Last Jedi, that was no more. Taika Waititi after Thor, Love and Thunder, Patty Jenkins after Wonder Woman 84, and I am nervous that it's going to happen to James Mangold after this. If it turns out to be a bomb.
They can't. No, it's Lucasfilm. They can't. If they do that, it's admitting double defeat. They're never gonna do that with their own property or their own film.
That's what happened with Rian Johnson. He
I guess that's true. That's literally in Star Wars
property.
I guess that's true. I would say because it's, I don't know. I would say adjacent from the franchise though for Indiana Jones. Also, I think the budget was $260 million. Still insane.
I heard 295.
Oh, 295 equally.
295 is what's on IMDb as the estimated. It's all estimates. No one really knows. It's all just projections. Yeah. But it did have. I mean, even still, that's a very high budget even for a modern day blockbuster.
Yeah. I feel like even at the time of recording, it could be considered a flop. I think the only reason they're not calling it is out of respect for Harrison Ford. Is my only guess.
It might be, yeah. And I think they intentionally released it around the 4th of July holiday, right? Because even though it fell on a Tuesday, it was a long holiday. And Indiana Jones is like a fairly patriotic character, right? I mean, the guy fights Nazis and all that stuff. Yeah. But I did read this article that this indie movie called Sound of Freedom or something like that outperformed it on July 4th, which is like it's a small indie movie that was like crowdfunded, and that beat out Indiana Jones on the 4th of July. So it's just not great signs.
I just talked to our friend Josh, who also does music for this podcast, about the movie today because his parents saw it. It's like a indie Christian movie, which is
Sound of Freedom.
Yeah, zero idea what it was. I thought it was a music doc, to be honest. When he told me about it like this morning.
I only know about it from that article that I was reading about. It was the first and only time I've heard about it. It's about child sex trafficking is what I understand. It has decent scores, and then that's the other problem with Indiana Jones too, is I feel like it's not getting very great reviews right now. Luke and I have not seen it. Matt saw it. You texted me after you saw it and you were like, yeah, it was good, not great.
Yep.
And that seems to be kind of the consensus that I'm seeing. I think one of the mistakes that they made leading up to it was premiering it at the Cannes Film Festival, because I said so at the time. I was like, that's kind of a weird choice to make, because in my thinking, the critical audience at Cannes is not the type of crowd that's going to be very receptive of a fifth installment of a blockbuster franchise movie. But I thought that Lucasfilm was obviously very confident in the film, and that's why they did it. And the reviews have only been kind of lukewarm. It's not negative. I wouldn't say it's been overwhelmingly negative.
Yeah, I think it's got a couple of things against them as well, just like having Harrison Ford being 81 years old. But I think yeah, I mean, I liked it a lot. But it's a very fun movie. But I think that's another thing too, is like box office, right? You're looking at like The Flash, which is underperforming. You're looking at Indiana Jones is underperforming. But then you're looking at these random indie movies, Asteroid City by Wes Anderson. You're looking at this Sound of Freedom movie, and I feel like that is something that maybe we can talk about at some point, which is that tide is kind of turning a little bit, which is bad superhero movie fatigue, as you say, Max, because I think superhero fatigue. I said this to you a couple of weeks ago, and then you were like, no, I think it's like bad superhero fatigue, like bad superhero movie fatigue. And I think that is very true. And I think we're coming at this point now where the audience sees so much on a daily basis, right? I saw an article yesterday that was like Marvel murdered cinema, and now it's trying to destroy TV, especially with like the more and more shows. And that is one of those things that it does feel kind of true that they're kind of moving into in that space where I think other independent cinema is going to go back into theaters, because I feel like it's a logical step, right? And I don't think it's like we have to have one or the other. And that's an aggressive article as well. But
that's why I kind of laughed when you said that, because I feel like everyone always comes at those things with like their own certain biases.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like, oh, these movies are destroying cinema. It's like, well, no, there's actually a lot of really good and interesting things that people are doing. And then also people want to take these movies on for a reason who have come from independent cinema, which is like, I obviously love Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese, and all these people can say all these things about these movies, right? And then you're looking at Ryan Johnson, who's making movies like Brick and all these indie movies, who then presumably is not making a ton of money. And it's like a lot easier for these people who are in their 70s and 80s to be like, these movies are destroying everything. And yet like they've made their money, right? And like independent movies like they used to make just don't make that money like they used to.
Right.
This is a very weird tangent I did not see coming.
It is. I'll loop it back. So anyway, so you don't think that James Mangold's movie will get quote unquote shelved? I say shelved because the way these things work is they never take anything off the table, right? They just, I feel like how it would happen realistically is a couple weeks from now we start getting these rumors, quote unquote rumors from Lucasfilm that James Mangold's project is no longer moving forward, and then time will go on, people will keep asking, they'll deny until eventually they just kind of admit it as if it's already a fact in the record, right? And they'll just be like, oh yeah, well we're not moving forward with that at this time, but it's still there.
Yeah, I don't think so. I feel like potentially this and then the Ray movie, because they were talking about how they are semi-intertwined.
I saw that they were thematically linked.
And I feel like when you're talking about them being thematically linked, whether that's a power move from him to not get canned, which I don't think it is.
That'd be a bold strategy.
Isn't it? Yes. Classic Hazel right there. Go for it. Hazel. And then, but I also feel like the fact that these movies actually feel real, like, and they're actually being made and are in pre-production, being written, or at least like concepting what it's going to look like visually, where I feel like Lucasfilm has announced a bunch of other movies or shows a couple of years ago, right, at Celebration, and I feel like a lot of those were like, this is what's going on, and it's like, but is any of that actually true? Like, looking back in retrospect, I feel like they were like, we need to announce something because there's a date, and I don't know how much of that was actually fact. And then obviously half of that stuff is now shelved. Acolytes, right? The Patty Jenkins show.
The Acolyte is coming out.
Sorry, not Acolyte. Yes, Rogue Squadron.
That was the Patty Jenkins movie, yeah.
And so I think a lot of those are like, they had a cool director attached to a cool title with some cool key art. But I'm wondering actually how much was solidified in actuality.
So you think they are far enough along that they're going forward with it?
I would say so.
Good.
I'd be surprised if they're far enough along. I don't think they're less far along than Rogue Squadron was. I thought Rogue Squadron, I thought they had already started casting people, not publicly, but I thought they were relatively far along, a lot further than I would think the James Mangold project is. I mean, there's no way he's done anything on it. Like, Indy just came out, and so he hasn't had time to do anything for it. I remember when these three movies were announced, the Filoni Mandoverse movie, the Ray movie, and the James Mangold movie. Mm-hmm. I said then that I would be shocked if all three of these movies actually saw the light of day. Because of the track record for the last several years, they've announced a dozen movies, and we've gotten 5, and so it's just the odds are not with them, and it's not like they've turned a leaf culturally or in anyone's mind about doing things better or different. And so I have no reason to think anything's going to be different this time around.
I don't love that though too. Now thinking about that, like from a fandom, like we get excited about these movies, and like Star Wars is a fandom where you're taking things to heart a little bit, right? And you're looking forward to things, and we're talking about stories we want to be told. If we did this 3 years ago, I feel like half the stories we could potentially be talking about, we're like, oh, what if this concept over here, and we did this, or a Rey movie, right? And then all of a sudden they wouldn't come to fruition after being announced. It's kind of tough.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Matt, you've talked about before about how you're glad that they're going forward with the Rey movie because they're kind of like doubling down on Rey in that era, which I 100% agree. And that's why I'm being cynical. I think that this project is going to get shelved, but I hope it doesn't. I want Disney to start sticking to their guns. When they announce something, stick through with it. Don't get cold feet. Don't get nervous because Lucasfilm under Disney, I don't know how much control Disney has over Lucasfilm, whatever, but Lucasfilm has, I think, proven to me in the last 8 years to be very risk averse. They do not like taking chances. Whenever they start to see sight of something going south, they immediately try to switch. During Solo with Lord and Miller, they immediately got Ron Howard because they thought that was a safer choice. After The Last Jedi, they got nervous because Rian Johnson did some different things, and so they brought JJ back to finish it out. The list goes on, right? But I want them to take more risks because when they take risks in their stories, I feel like is when we see the most success. When you play it safe, I feel like the best case scenario is you turn out something that's safe. It's not outstanding. It's not amazing. It's just, it's okay at best. And sometimes they're not even that good. But I don't think it's a coincidence that if you took a poll of the best 3 things that Star Wars has done since being under Disney, I think those 3 things would be Rogue One, Andor, and The Mandalorian. And those are the only 3 things that weren't really tied. Well, they're tied, obviously, but they're the most unique movies or TV shows.
I would say, in fact, we did an episode about it, and we all kind of said the same thing.
And I don't think we're alone on that. I don't think that was I don't think that was an unpopular opinion by any means. So that's, I wanted to talk about that because I didn't have that James Mangold's project on our list to talk about, but I did want to talk about that off the top. I don't know if we're going to see it, but I hope we do.
One more thing before we change the subject. The Mangold movie, in addition to James Mangold being the creator that's most likely to be steered away from because of the performance of Indiana Jones, the 3 movies that were announced was the cinematic finale to the Mandalorian storyline, the Rey movie with Daisy Ridley already attached, and a New Era Dawn of the Jedi original story. Like, one of these 3 projects is not like the others.
Yeah.
And if you're Disney, one of them is a lot riskier than the others, and it just got a lot more risky. I think if Mangold was making the Rey movie or the Mando movie, then it would be more of a discussion, but I think it just needed one thing to push it over the limit, and this is probably it.
So you don't think it's going to happen now?
No. I didn't think it was going to happen then. I do want it to happen. I think it sounds like a great story, and I would love the movie, but I didn't really think it was ever going to happen, and now I certainly don't.
I think the new Indiana Jones is very fun. The only thing that I had a couple problems with, it was like some of the jokes fell really flat. There's no space for it. And this is we can talk about this in another episode because I don't want to tip my hat too much on some other stuff we're talking about, but I really enjoyed it. But the thing about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is that part of me didn't feel like a full indie movie because it's a lot quicker than the original trilogy, and then the original trilogy feels just like I should be talking about Star Wars. And then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, kind of the same thing, is that it's got this I don't want to say fakey look to it, but it's this. I don't know. This one moves a lot quicker, and I think for Indiana Jones it's weird, but for Star Wars it would work beautifully. And so I think if you're looking at something from a Star Wars perspective, I think this movie, Dial of Destiny, would be a good thing to put forward to say why you should work on this, because the CG work and stuff, and then the action set pieces are really, really fun and really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's also still very early. It's only been out for about a week, too, and there's a bunch of different factors that go into it. So, I mean, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, hopefully it does well enough that this is not even a conversation that Lucasfilm is having. Is his name pronounced Mangold?
I don't know.
It's spelled
gonna
like
say
Mangold.
Yeah.
We should start saying Mangold, even if it is wrong, because I don't like talking about the Mangold Star Wars project.
I hadn't thought about that. That's funny.
But what is Mangold? That just seems inherently sexual.
Mangold sounds like a great Star Wars project.
That sounds like a bad Bond villain.
Yeah.
It does.
All right, so let's talk about some other stories that have been teased that we haven't gotten yet. Starting with one of the most obvious, and that is Solo 2. Make Solo 2 happen is a thing.
Yeah.
People try to get it started because I think Solo ended on a big cliffhanger, specifically Kira and Maul's storyline, and I'm curious what you guys think. I know for me personally, I feel like I'm in the minority of the Star Wars fan base where I actually don't want a Solo 2.
Oh,
Really? That is definitely the minority.
No, I think
it's
I agree with
semantics,
them.
though. It's
Yeah,
semantics
I
because
agree.
I think you can tell Kira and Maul's stories. I think you can continue those outside of Solo.
Yeah.
Because if you make Solo 2, you have to bring back Han Solo, obviously, Lando, Chewbacca, and it's like, where do they fit in that story moving forward? Like, I feel like the ending of Solo was like a splitting of paths.
Yep.
And I feel like we
Everyone-
could come back to Solo 2, but then I feel like Kira and Maul don't really fit in there anymore because I feel like they're kind of going off and doing their own thing.
I 1000% agree. I think I would love. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes is that they're letting time pass, right? But I think another really great thing is that they can do is that if these stories are split, they can always bring back these characters. Not Han Solo, but they can bring back Kira and Maul and. Because we don't know what they look like, right? In like in 10 years or in 15 years. But I think that's right. I always figured if they did a Solo 2, quote unquote, it would be a thematically linked, this is like the second time we use that phrase, Solo 2, and the fact that presumably Kira would be the lead character. And maybe Han and Chewie would be minor characters or maybe not seen at all. But I just assume that we would weave in and out kind of, and they would be the baseline of the story. And then, yeah, and who knows what the third one would be, but I assume either the main character would come out of it or we would just focus on Maul.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't really thought about the details like that because Han wouldn't be able to interact with Maul for canonical reasons. He
Yep.
doesn't believe in the Jedi or the Force. And so...
Well, he could interact with him and just not know that he's Force sensitive. I mean, he's still a presumed crime lord, right? So
Yeah, I guess that... Yeah, you're right. So... I disagree entirely. Make Solo 2 happen. Bring back Alden Ehrenreich. Bring Maul. Bring Kira. I would love to see that.
Bring the fam.
Because you also can't have a Kira. I think it would be wrong to have a Kira sequel without Han in it. And so, yeah, everything just works too well. But I also kind of disagree with you that letting time pass is a problem. Similar to my thoughts on like a Kenobi 2 or like when Kenobi wasn't even made yet, and everyone was talking like, "Oh, we gotta get this made." Like Ewan McGregor was aging into that role perfectly, and Alden Ehrenreich, he's not going to turn into Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
But he played in a very young Han Solo, and so as Alden Ehrenreich gets older, it's not unreasonable for him to play an older Han Solo because he's never going to play a younger Han Solo. So I think it's okay to let time pass. Chewbacca's timeless. You know, Emilia Clarke isn't going to age for another 30 years, probably looking at her. And so I think we have time.
Yeah.
You know, the selfish part of me wants it today, right now,
Same.
but I don't think it's going to suffer from having to be waited on for 10 years or so.
It'll be a prequel thing, right? When everyone ends up accepting it. Like, we all really think it's a fun movie, and then I feel like eventually it'll be more accepted and be like, oh, yeah, we actually do want more and more of that. Which we already want now.
I think that's coming sooner than we think, though, because I feel like the fan base does really like Solo. I mean, it didn't do well at the box office for a lot of different reasons, right? It came in like 5 months after The Last Jedi, which was very divisive. So shortly after that as well. And I think it was like did Rogue One come out in May, or was that also a winter
No, it was
release?
Christmas.
So this was also the only one that was in the middle of the summer, which didn't like feel like Star Wars at
And
the time.
little to no marketing.
That feels like a good... It feels like a good summer blockbuster movie. It just so happens to be Star Wars, which has like kind of in our... tied behind its back a little bit, because it's like it is. If you're not a fan of Star Wars, you're not gonna go see Solo, right? Like presumably, but at the same time, I feel like if they do another one of these, it feels like the perfect Disney Plus show, or so. And which I never say, but like you can give the fans what you want and have quote unquote, I guess, like next to little risk versus reward. I mean, like, you don't. I mean, how much money can you lose out? I guess I say that as Disney's like failing a little bit. Disney Plus is failing, but at the same time, they could. I mean, I don't know.
I think it'd be great for a Disney Plus show.
Right?
I think it would be more well served as a series than a movie because
agree.
there's a lot of story to tell about. Maul is at the height of his power. Like I would love to see episodes of this show about Maul rising the ranks in Crimson Dawn, and then Kira and Maul falling, and not to mention everything that Han and Chewie are doing. So
honestly, maybe the Ahsoka show will kind of ignite the fire a little bit, because the Ahsoka show, I feel like if you're not a huge fan of Rebels or Clone Wars, you don't know those shows. If you watch Ahsoka because you like live action Star Wars, you're going to want to go back and revisit these shows if you've never watched them before, which then you will find how cool Maul actually is, not just from the prequels, but like imagine not knowing Rebels or Clone Wars and then going and watching them and be like, oh no, he's actually really rad, and then now I understand that Solo ending way better. And I feel like that is a possibility where
that's true. I haven't really been preparing for this. I wonder if you guys have thought of it. Like, after Ahsoka was introduced in The Mandalorian Season 2, there was a huge renaissance in the Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen 10 times over here in August.
I 1000% agree.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Especially when you get Hero and stuff, and and just like Chopper, and we got a little bit of Zeb. Like, I don't know. Like, I definitely feel like that's more, I feel like all those.
Definitely. So, make Solo 2. Luke says yay.
Strongly on board. Yes.
Matt?
On board, but like you said, it's semantics.
Meaning
Because
you don't want Han in it?
Oh, I'd be fine if he was in it. I just feel like thematically carry that story over or continue the Maul and Kira storyline at the very least.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're talking about a TV series too, which wouldn't really be like a true sequel, but I would agree with that because that way you could also do it too. This is a very specific comparison, kind of like Better Call Saul, where it's like almost like two completely different stories side by side that don't really interact with each other until kind of the very end. That way you can have like this little side plot with Han and Lando, and you can follow them, and then you can kind of cut that in between with Kira and Maul, and you can kind of have like that fun kind of like back and forth where like their paths keep almost crossing but never do until the very end.
Do you think the Lando movie will... I know that's like still in talks with
it's a show.
Don Glover, the show. Do you think Kira and Maul would show up in that instead of Han? It would just continue that story on.
Is that still planned or is that shelved?
I think
Donald Glover talked about it recently, and he implied that it was moving forward, which I feel like it would have been very easy to imply that it wasn't. So
yes, I agree.
I believe it.
Me too.
Oh, that's exciting. I didn't know that.
And so I'm just like, right now, I'm just like, everything we're saying feels like it lines up exactly with what we're
That being
talking
said,
about.
That'd be great.
We were talking about timing, like letting time pass is a disservice. Billy D. Williams is old, and
you need to jump on that today.
Yeah, we're definitely running out of time for him to be an asset for this show.
Sit him in front of a camera now and just get a bunch of B-roll of him talking, and then we'll just cut it together like Leia and the Rise of Skywalker.
CP3O.
CP3.
The best interview of all time. And who's the gold one? I don't know his name. CP3. Oh yeah, CP3O.
Yeah. All right, so that was Solo 2. The other one I wanted to talk about was we just referenced it a second ago, Obi-Wan Kenobi Season 2. What do you guys think about that for a sequel? Or, well, a second season.
Strongly pro. Give me more Qui-Gon. That's what I wanted most from Season 1, and we got it just as like a little breadcrumb at the end, which was aggravating to me, and if they never follow up on it, I'll be kind of bothered, but it's right there. Like, there's such a good story to be told. Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor are in for it, and I think it would just be a slam dunk. I really, really want Kenobi 2.
Did Liam Neeson say he's in for it? I didn't hear that.
He came back for Kenobi 1. Why wouldn't he be? What's he doing?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I just didn't know if that was like a thing that he had already talked about.
No. I think Liam Neeson is always down for because he returned for the Clone Wars to lend his voice. Like, no one else from live action Star Wars has done that. Like,
yeah.
I'm trying to think because that's a big statement to say.
So
very few people, if they have. But
and
I think
he did Rise of Skywalker, right? His voice briefly in there. I think that was newly recorded material. Not yeah. I mean, they say Ray, so
right.
Matt,
he's actually talking about Ray Parker.
What do you think of Kenobi Season 2?
I mean, I think we talked about it. It's a little dicey. I think they can learn from their mistakes. I mean, yes, I want to see that, whether it's a show or a movie. I think, I mean, it's confusing if we're talking about doing a solo show from a movie and then a movie from a Kenobi show.
That would be so funny after all the turmoil Kenobi went through to be a movie finally, and then it was turned into a TV show. If the sequel was an actual movie,
yeah, that would.
that would just be the biggest roller coaster.
I think it makes. I mean, I think people are like, oh no, like that story's closed. Basically, he just like lives on Tatooine forever. But it's like, how much cooler would it be if he actually didn't? Like, if he's Tatooine's his home base. He's like, you know, keeping an eye on Luke. But there's actually more story to be told. I'm sure there is. And like you said, there's like more Qui-Gon would be great too. Part of me also, yeah. I mean, Ewan McGregor, I think would definitely do it. Right? He's been a very big advocate for it. I think people have gotten behind him. Yeah. I mean, I would like to see more. I like, that's the thing with almost all of these. I like Star Wars, so I want to see more Star Wars.
It's hard to say no to anything.
Exactly, because I'm just like until it's done, and you're like, I don't like that. But so far, there's been things I'm like, yeah, that wasn't done great, right? Boba Fett, big maybe the best
best example of a swing and a miss.
The best example of a swing and a miss. With that being said, I think they are learning from their mistakes, and though Star Wars has been around for a very long time, they're in the TV space it's very new, right? Streaming for Star Wars is very new, and so I think they are stumbling like any sort of production company would do when they're trying to figure out what works for them. And so far, I think they are figuring out, and those are those bigger swings like Mandalorian when you don't really have the Jedi or lightsabers or anything. I mean, until you do in that show, or like Andor. But yeah, I mean, yes, I would like to see some sort of form of Kenobi too.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of on the same page as you.
Yeah.
Because it is all semantics. Because once again, I'm going to give myself a cop out and say that I do want to continue these stories from Kenobi, but not in a Kenobi season 2. And we've done an episode previously reviewing Kenobi where I've talked about it, so I'm not going to spend too much time getting into it. But the highlights are I don't see how you can go forward with a second season of Kenobi without including Darth Vader, because Anakin and Obi-Wan stories are so intertwined that you can't have one without the other. So I don't think a Kenobi season 2 makes sense, but I think you can still continue the stories of these characters. You can include Obi-Wan, you can include a now redeemed Reva, Qui-Gon, Force Qui-Gon in a different story, such as the next one that I wanted to bring up with you guys, which was The Hidden Path. I think they can have a TV show or a movie about the Hidden Path, basically following a group of Jedi trying to help other Force sensitives set in the time of the Empire. I think it's a really fun timeline to explore. It's probably the one that we explore the most. So, but there's a reason for that. Everyone likes that timeline. And getting to see like these Jedi who everyone loves, and there's a bunch of different Jedi that can make appearances. Quinlan Voss is being constantly teased as having survived Order 66. I would like to see some Kelleran Beck. That would be cool. We can see Obi-Wan show up. We can see a redeemed Reva. We can see all these characters. We can see Cal Kestis from the Jedi Survivor game. Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor. What's the game called? It's branded as just Jedi.
Star Wars Jedi, yeah. Star Wars Jedi, I think there might be a colon. Fallen Order is the first one, and then Star Wars Jedi Survivor.
It just feels weird being like, oh, the character from Star Wars Jedi.
Yeah,
that feels like you're saying half a name there.
I agree.
But he can show up, and so that's what I would pitch. And what do you guys think about that? Would you want to see a movie or a TV show about the Hidden Path?
Yes. That's everything I want. I want Jedi and... Well, I guess everything I want is basically just Jedi, because that's my favorite part about Star Wars. Is like the lore and the mythology, and the Jedi are a massive part of that. And I was thinking when we were preparing for this episode, like stories we want told, and I was like, I would love more Jedi stuff. But like in the sequel era, we're getting that with Rey. In the prequel era, we got that with the Clone Wars, and then we're getting it with the High Republic also before then. And so if we can't go before or after the original trilogy, it's really hard to do it in the middle of. But this would be perfect. You know, we could see different Jedi fighting against the Empire. It works canonically, and I think it could work thematically. And yeah, I would really, really like this.
It's a story that's now being teased in multiple media, because the Hidden Path is brought up in the Jedi Survivor game. It's also obviously brought up in Kenobi. I'm trying to think of anything else. I don't think it's come up in any book or comic book that I know of, but they're laying that groundwork for it. And, you know, it seems like something that's like... they have this infrastructure in place, and there's definitely a story to be told there.
Yeah, and it seems like something Disney would just love to do, because we know they love making content in the original trilogy era.
Right.
Like that's their MO. They really bend over backwards to try to make everything in this era as close as they can, or when they make a new era, they just try to remake the original trilogy era. And so I think it's what they want, it's what we want. Let's do this.
Yeah, I mean, I 1000% agree. I think it's in the fan theories episode, maybe I was talking about the Galactic Cruiser, like that'd be a perfect like show type situation, and I feel like the Hidden Path is like 10 times better, right? If you use that as the central theme and the connector, and you can have a Game of Thrones style show where you have the Hidden Path with all these different Jedi moving back and forth, and that's the central thing they can come back to. Yeah, I mean, give me everybody in one. Don't just like do Amanda, right? I just want to see a bigger Star Wars show, and I think the Hidden Path is like the perfect opportunity to do that, because you have literally the possibilities are endless, whether it's Jedi or whether it's people helping in that path. Yeah, I'd love to see it.
And I feel like Star Wars also works better as an ensemble, right? Like the original trilogy, you got the crew, you got Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, Obi-Wan, like you got everyone there, and I feel like that's like the only thing that's really missing from Mandalorian. Like you were kind of hinting at, it's like when you just follow Din Djarin, it's like I need some variety.
Yep, and that's all we talk about with Mando. It's like give me a Bo-Katan like a storyline, like give me a B and C storyline. Like we can
because in season
throughout.
3, everyone was like, oh, they're just making this the Bo-Katan show, and I feel like a lot of people are like, yeah, but that's okay though. Like we can start hearing other people's stories.
But again, that's another filmmaker problem where it's just like if that's gonna be the thing, give us breadcrumbs so we're like we expect it eventually, not just be like, oh, that's what they're doing, and people are upset about it. It's like no. Let us be like, yeah, do you see why though?
Right.
It would also be refreshing for this show to not have any of the main characters have any plot armor. Because like I know Rogue One, everyone dies, but if we got a show with like Quinlan Vos and Cal Kestis, like there's no guarantees that any of them will survive an episode. Like that would bring a very unique kind of intensity. Because I mean, we didn't know canonically that Boba Fett survived his own show, but we knew. And like Andor, Kenobi, we rarely get shows with unique characters, let alone unique characters that we are not confident will survive to the end of the season. So that would be a lot of fun too.
That's all we're talking about with Din Djarin and Grogu, but not necessarily in their show, just in the bigger grand scheme picture of when do these characters end. Same thing with Bad Batch. But like, I mean, Bad Batch a little less because like, yeah, they're probably gonna they're definitely dead at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Din Djarin and Grogu, they're not gonna die in The Mandalorian.
Grogu will never die.
No.
Grogu will outlive us all by a lot.
I can't wait for the moment where whatever show it is, eventually we'll see a Grogu be very old, right? And I'm very excited to see that.
I think you're going to have your grandkids reach you from beyond the grave.
No, they're going to have it. They're going to have it.
Might be waiting for a while.
Not in Mandalorian, but just wait. In like 10 years, not even.
I would put the over-under at 100 years for that story.
Really?
Yeah.
That's taking the under.
Oh, man.
Well, Luke, you just said you want to hear more Jedi stories, and I know you're real big into the High Republic, and that's one thing that I wanted to talk about. We talked about the Mangold movie, The Dawn of the Jedi, but I think that's supposed to be before the High Republic era.
Yeah, significantly, like 1,000 years before Phantom Menace, and the High Republic's only 200.
What would you like to see, if anything, of the High Republic? Do you want to see a TV show, a movie, animated, live action, and do you have any ideas what it could be about? I think you kind of follow the High Republic era closer than we do.
Yeah. So the books, there's been 2 phases, 6 waves of books, or 5 waves of books, excuse me. So each wave has a young adult and an adult novel and other comics and young reader novels. But there's been like 5 major galaxy altering books. And so I don't think we really need to see any of that in a movie. I would really not like to see any of the books made into movies because the books are so good and there's so many other movies that I'd like to see made. We don't need to start adapting stuff like that. So I think it's best suited for an animated series because there's so many Jedi that can go on so many adventures. It's such an interesting time period because they're like exploring the Outer Rim, and so there's so many places they could go that are familiar to the audience but could be different because it's hundreds of years earlier, and so you could see like what's different, the technological advances that will be made, the problems of not having that technology that we're expected to seeing, and so I think that would be best suited. And we're looking for a new animated series because Bad Batch is wrapping up soon.
And it's kind of goofy, right? Like, is it the Talking Rock?
No, it's not. The Rock doesn't
not talk. I
can see why you think that'd be goofy because of whenever anyone explains it. So Matt is referring to Geode, a character in the High Republic. He's a Vintian, Vintian. He is a rock.
Yes.
By all metrics.
Yes.
He is sentient and he can teleport or move somehow, but he only does it when no one's looking. And he can talk, but no one can hear or understand him except for some of his friends.
Yes. It's a great book. In Something of the Light?
In Into the Dark is the book he's introduced in, but he's in several.
Oh, damn.
And all of his friends just like talk to him, and then it's like the narrator is like, oh, this person knew based on Geode's stern silence that he meant that this. And
right.
So it's a very fun way, and it sounds goofy, but it's not written goofy because he's written like a legitimate character that has interactions and contributions to the plot and characters. So no, he's not goofy, but There is room for Goofy in the High Republic. There are things that are Goofy.
You're right. Into the Dark. That's the only High Republic book I read, and I really dug it. I just mean Goofy, like visually. Like it'd be really hard sell to be in a live action. It worked super well in animation, though, is what I mean. Like it'd be a hard sell to see a rock transport, I think, in live action.
Well, that's the thing. You never see it. It's just in a different. He is just in a different spot.
You would just constantly cut to him sitting next to you, and be like, "Oh, hey, Gio, didn't see you there. Sorry."
That's really how it is in the books, though, and it's hilarious. He's one of my favorite characters.
The High Republic is currently in Phase 2.
Terrible action figure.
It just recently wrapped Phase 2.
It wrapped Phase 2.
Phase 3 starts this fall.
Are there only going to be 3 phases?
We are to believe that, yes. I would be shocked if they didn't continue that era in some capacity.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Do you think this TV show should follow Phase 3, or do you think it should lead up to Phase 1?
Well, I think Phase 3... Well, it's interesting because The Acolyte is in the High Republic era, and that is coming out relatively soon, either this fall or this spring. And that is going to be after Phase 3 because Phase 3 is going to end, I'm estimating here, because Phase 1 is like 200 years before the Skywalker Saga, and Phase 2 is like 400 years before the Skywalker Saga. But then Phase 3 is like a sequel to Phase 1, so it's like 190 years before the Skywalker Saga because it's the same characters like resolving all their stories.
It's an interesting order to go in.
It is, but it followed the Star Wars trilogies where you have the original trilogy and then the prequels and then the sequels.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't even think of that.
But The Acolyte takes place at the very end of the High Republic era, which I say in quotes because it's kind of a vaguely defined era so far. I think it's going to be like around 100 years before the Phantom Menace. We do know that there is one character in The Acolyte that was in the books. She's they actually say her age a lot because it's a character point. I think she's 16 in the books because she's like the youngest Jedi master in the order. And she's in The Acolyte, but she's like an old lady. She's a Miri Allen, which is like Luminara Unduli or Barasafi, that species.
Okay.
So we don't know what they age like per se. They could fudge numbers and say she ages very slowly and they live to be 300 years. But I think we are to believe that it'll be like she'll be like 90 years old and that they can realistically live that long, and that's when this show will take place. So I think that'll be like the end of the High Republic era. Now I've lost my train of thought.
Where the animated High Republic show would fit in there.
It could fit between Phase 3 and the Acolyte very well, because after Phase 3, the Nile will be all wrapped up, assumedly, and there's going to be another, 75 years of the Jedi in their heyday, as they keep calling it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of time there and a lot of good characters that we already know that we'd love to see. Like, there's a lot of great Padawans and younglings in the High Republic that it'd be awesome to see grow older and have an animated series with them.
Yeah. I also would like to see that from reading one book. I don't know. I like it.
And I think that's a good idea, too, to make it an animated series. I feel like that would make it more appealing. Well, not necessarily appealing. I think that would make it like an easier jumping on point. Because people hold live action to just like a different standard, Like I feel like a lot of people they would feel like they are obligated to go back and study up on the High Republic if it were live action.
Well, I'm curious on how that is going to go down, because The Acolyte is live action and it's coming out and it's full on High Republic era. Like, we've seen set costume photos and they have the High Republic robes and the aesthetic is very in line with what we've seen in the High Republic so far. So I wonder if that's going to happen already.
All right. Well, the next one I want to talk about another one that we kind of briefly alluded to, and that is the Book of Boba Fett, Season 2. First off, do we even want it?
No. It's one of those things where it was done, right? You can't undo Boba Fett's character. They could turn him super good. I think he should show up in The Mandalorian all he wants. I'm okay with that for sure, but I don't think he needs his own show. Again, it'd be a Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker thing where you just would be retconning everything he did, or you would just get a super boring story of him potentially being mayor. Like, like it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anything I just said did not excite me about Boba Fett. One of the coolest characters ever. Like when you're growing up, you're like, I want to know more about that guy. Mm-hmm. When you find out more about him, you're like, man,
Yeah,
like
they
him
didn't.
better as a mysterious person.
They didn't even have enough stuff about Boba Fett to fill the first season of his show. We don't need to start grasping for a second.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't want a second
Yeah.
season of Boba Fett. I think Boba Fett himself can show up in Mandalorian, like Matt said. The only reason I bring it up is because I do want more Cobb Vanth and Cad Bane. I feel like Cad Bane did survive after he gets shot. They make that deal in the subtitles about how like the beeping kind of continues.
Yeah, the audio description.
Yeah.
Do the thematic thing. I think that's what we're saying with all of these. It's like they're telling these stories adjacently. I would say adjacently wrong, but they could be told adjacently better, and then turn, I guess, adjacently
Yeah.
wrong.
Well, I've talked before about how my theory that I believe 100% that the Book of Boba Fett was originally supposed to be season 3 of The Mandalorian, and season 3 of The Mandalorian was originally supposed to be season 4, and the Mandalorian character would be a different title character after season 2, because season 2 is the end of Din Djarin's story arc for all intents and purposes, and then season 3 would be Mandalorian, and season 4 would be Bo-Katan, and then that's where we are now. And I think maybe, I don't think they actually ever said this out loud even, or maybe even like wrote it down, but I do think Dave Filoni had in the back of his mind that maybe one day season 5, The Mandalorian could be Cobb Vanth, and I would love to see a Mandalorian season 5 where Cobb Vanth is a main character, or the Book of Cobb Vanth if they want to go that route again.
Book of Cobb Vanth.
But I agree. I'd be okay with seeing less or not any more of Cad Bane. But Cobb Vanth, I have a distinct hunger for.
Yeah.
I like the way you said that, honestly.
I think a lot of people do. I think Cobb Vanth was a very good addition to this universe, to the galaxy, and I just like that they pulled him out of the books because in 2015 when Star Wars was coming back and they were doing all these books and everything, we all thought that this was going to be a lot more interrelated than it turned out to be. But I absolutely love that they had this little mini interlude. It was like 3 pages about this character, Cobb Vanth, and how he got this armor, and they actually stayed true to it. I feel like that could have been so easy to just write off and be like, okay, sure, maybe that happened, but here's what happened after that, or something different like that. So I love that they stayed true to that, and I want to see more of them sticking to these stories in the books and have these things come back. And that segues into my next category, which is Ray Sloan. Now, for those of you who follow the podcast, know that we bring her up quite frequently. And she was the main villain in the Aftermath trilogy, and she basically ended the trilogy by going off in the outer or the unknown regions, outer rim, I don't know where. Unknown regions to start the First Order.
Assumedly,
yes. Strongly assumedly.
Yes.
That's more than just an implication.
Well, until we get more story elements, it is still an implication.
But I want to see...
But that's what we're talking about. We want to see that implication followed through.
Correct. And I
assume that's what you're talking about. You want to see that?
I do. But once again, I don't want to see it like in its own show. I think that this could probably be a good tie into Ahsoka. We've talked about that kind of previously. I think maybe Ray Sloan can make an appearance in Ahsoka in the Ahsoka show, even though I know that it appears to already be chock full of antagonists. But what do you guys think? Do you want to see Ray Sloan, and how would you like to see it?
I do want to see Ray Sloan. The Ahsoka show, I can't think of a more perfect place for Ray Sloan to show up. It would have been in the sequels with the First Order, but that's come and gone, and it wasn't then. And so I think that this Ahsoka show is perfect. It's like right after she went into the unknown regions, she can come out to fight Ahsoka. She can join up with Grand Admiral Thrawn. There's lots of reasons to bring her out. There's lots of Imperials that they need for the show. You could rewrite it a little bit to fit Ray Sloan into it. I think a lot of fans would appreciate it. Dave Filoni is really into rewarding fans like that. I really hope Ray Sloan is in this. And I think it's more possible than a lot of my theories that she will be.
I have not read the Aftermath trilogy, so I yield my time. But I mean, I would say, bring more characters from books into the live action. I think it's fun. Or cartoons, I mean, we're getting that with Ahsoka with Rebels, and I'm loving it. So if anybody else get excitement from Ray Sloan, it's weirdest character name, I would say
it's all one universe, and so I really just appreciate when they stay true to the universe and bring in these characters, such as one of the highlights for me in the Book of Boba Fett was when they brought in Black Krrsantan into it.
Yes.
That was just completely unnecessary, other than somebody just saw that character in the comic book and said, oh, I like that character. That's a cool character. Let's bring him in.
Why is it called the Book of Boba Fett, going back real quick? Am I blanking on it?
Because it was going to be season 3 of The Mandalorian, but they didn't want to do that because Din Djarin and Grogu were so marketable and so successful. And so each episode of The Mandalorian is a chapter, and they were like,
So
oh,
you think
we'll
seasons
just
1 through
make
2,
this a new book.
seasons 1 through 2 were going to be the Book of Din Djarin, and season 3 would be the Book of Boba Fett, and season 4 would be the Book of Bo-Katan.
And at the very end, it's George Lucas writing them, and he closes them and puts them on a shelf, and that's how the series ends.
Classic Lord of the Rings style, there and back again.
And Game of Thrones.
And Game of
I
Thrones.
forgot about that. Oh, man.
There is something like that with the Journal of the Wills. Maybe I shouldn't have even brought it up if you guys don't know more about it than I do. But the Journal of the Wills is something like that. I have nothing else to offer.
All right. I'm kind of winding down here. What else do you guys want to see? Luke, I know you've talked about wanting to see more alien lore as well as more Kit Fisto. Do you have any ideas in particular?
Yes, I do stand Kit Fisto to a great degree, and I think there is story to explore. Star Wars has a great track record of taking random, innocuous things and expanding on them to an enormous degree. And I think the fact that Kit Fisto was significantly redesigned from episode 2 to episode 3 is worth exploring. In my head, my personal headcanon is that the Nantalan race loses their fish-like appearance and abilities if they go too far out of water. And in episode 2, Kit Fisto had been out of water for months or years, and that's why he's looking more like a human guy. And then the Clone Wars starts, and he needs to bulk up. So we get like a Rocky montage of him working out. He goes into the ocean, and he like absorbs its power and comes out, and he looks like he does in Revenge of the Sith, like a lot more like a fish. And all the Jedi are like, oh, hell yeah, Kit Fisto, you're going to be our main guy. You're going to be our general, because he was already the main guy in the Battle of Geonosis. He was the first one. I've mentioned that before, but I want to be clear that I was not just joking. In Attack of the Clones, when the Jedi and the Trade Federation droids, when they march at each other and the Jedi run at them, Kit Fisto is first to hit the battle droids. He runs a little bit faster, like Captain America in Infinity War. And so I think if he was full fish power, he would have been substantially faster. And even if it's not exactly this, I just want to see some story about Kit Fisto getting, I don't know, blown up in an explosion and has to have horrible facial reconstruction. They have to use more fish than a human. And so whatever it is, I just think more Kit Fisto, preferably something about the redesign, because I think that'd be fun.
What if it's what if he dies in the Coliseum and then another one of his species is there, just so happens to be force sensitive, classic Broom Boy, and takes his identity and runs with it. So it's a very Don Draper situation.
I was just about to say Mad Men, yeah.
Yep. Or, you know who did it first? The Simpsons. Principal Skinner had exact same storyline.
Really?
Yeah.
That'd be so funny. This Natalan shows up at the Jedi Council and they're like, "Oh, Kit, we thought we lost you," and he's like, "No, yes, I am Kit. As you remember my last name, yeah, Kit Fisto. Yes, Kit Fisto. That
and
is
I live where?
Really recontextualizes when he goes to confront Palpatine. He's like, "All right, Kit, come on, grab your lightsaber. We're going." He's like, "What are we doing?" And then the other two Jedi die right next to him, and he's like, "Oh my god!"
That's why he has no speaking roles in the Revenge of the Sith. He's just sitting there wide-eyed, like, "Oh my god, this is working so well."
His voice is significantly lower or higher. Kit Fisto. There it is.
Interesting. I love that you're so obsessed about the redesign. To be fair, I would say very little people have ever noticed the redesign.
Oh, no. It's very noticeable.
It's noticeable.
Yeah.
I don't think it's noticeable.
Would you have noticed if I wasn't such a bit? Really?
I don't think I would have ever noticed.
Oh, I think everyone notices.
I've gone back and I've looked at the pictures side by side.
With that being said, really? You look at the
they're-
pictures? I was going to say.
I know that they're different. Like,
Yeah.
yes, after you point it out, I'm like,
It
okay,
just
yeah,
looks
they
like
look a little different.
The mask is better, right? Like, it feels like...
It's not just better, it's different. Like, it wasn't a mask in Attack of the Clones. It was a guy with green paint on his face, and in Revenge of the Sith, it was a mask.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Kit Fisto... Same thing with Plo Koon. Again, associate them in my head. I think it's because me and Mike got a Kit Fisto action figure and a Plo Koon action figure like the same day. So, yeah, I think that's why I associate them in my head.
Rip to the one of you that got Plo Koon. Screw that kid. Your dad clearly had a favorite.
Plo Koon's cool.
Yeah, he is. But Kit Fisto's cooler. Give me more Kit Fisto content, please.
More Kit Fisto. For me, I guess, as well, I don't really have anything, honestly. Still, if I don't think I really have anything. Part of me would like to see the Bad Batch live action someday, but like it doesn't make any sense because you would basically have to deep fake someone's face, like Tem's face, basically over everybody. But
that's a lot of work.
That's too much work. But I don't know. I think I don't really know what I'd like to see. I'm just excited for what's next, and I think for me, I want to be excited about something that is new and exciting to come, right? And I think that's like we were talking about, like with Rogue One. It's filling in those plot holes. I like movies and shows that fill in like very small, minute plot holes. But I think ultimately, like Star Wars should be consistently advancing, and whether it's bringing characters from, like Kit Fisto, who needs to be explored more, just like they did with Boba Fett. Well, maybe not just like they did, but like they did in theory.
Yes, Kit Fisto and Boba Fett are the same in that regard.
Yes, but yeah, exploring other characters or just honestly something that's new and exciting. Honestly, I think that's all I got.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And to make this come full circle, back to the James Mangold discussion that we were having at the beginning, take chances, take risks.
Yeah.
They're not all going to work out. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of missteps along the way, but stop playing it safe, because when you play it safe, at best, you get something that's okay. At worst, you get something that's bad, right? And like I feel like that happened with Boba Fett, right? That they wanted something that people would like, that would have universal appeal. Everyone loves Boba Fett. Let's do Boba Fett. It wasn't good. And then they've done it with everything else too, right? Like Solo, Obi-Wan, and those kind of ran the gamut. I think Solo and Kenobi were pretty solid. Those aren't running away with the fandom as being like everyone's favorite, kind of like Andor or Rogue One is. But again, I digress. Take chances. I think that's kind of our key takeaway. Yeah.
We're getting serious this episode. We're coming in pretty hot. In the beginning, we're like, this is what's wrong with the industry.
All right. Well, let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know if there's anything that you think you want to see that's been teased or that hasn't been teased. If you have an original idea, let us know. You can reach out to us on social media. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Go ahead and follow us on any one of those.
I downloaded on my phone Threads before I came here. Haven't done anything with it, but that's the new social media I hear. Have you heard of it?
I have not. What is Threads?
It's I saw it marketed as Facebook's competitor to Twitter, which I don't like Twitter, but I like the idea of it. So
a lot of people don't like Twitter, so that might catch on.
So if Threads works out, see us there.
Hey, check us out on Threads.
Check us out on Threads. And then also this whole episode has been basically this whole episode is a force for thought. But the most important thing, are you equally as hungry for Cobb Vanth as Luke is? Oh, Luke is as fun. It sounds like Lucas.
Yeah.
I should cut that. That was more of a thought I should think.
See you, Sammy.
See you, Sammy.